Don't you just love the look of heat embossing on vellum? It can add such a lovely soft feel to cards and looks elegant and stunning with any design. Today I have 3 ways to use heat embossed vellum on your cards and can be used with a whole host of embossing powder colours and used for any occasion. I'm Verity, welcome to my channel. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on my next video. For the first heat embossed vellum card, we are going to create an embossed vellum overlay with an ink blended background. For this card I'm using the hand painted striped stencil from Thirsty Brush & Co, along with 2 Catherine Pooler inks. To start off with, take your stencil down to some Wow Superior Smooth cardstock, and this is great cardstock for ink blending. So using some ink blending tools, apply rose petal ink to the top of the card, fading this out as you move down the stencil. And for an ombre background, use peppermint scrub ink as the second colour and apply this to the bottom of the stencil, blending this up into the rose petal ink colour. This peppermint scrub is a lovely rich dark pink red colour. Next, remove the stencil and set your card panel to one side whilst we start working on the heat embossed vellum element of the card. So you want to trim a piece of vellum down so it's roughly ½ an inch smaller than your card panel, and once you've cleaned your stencil off, position this back over the vellum piece. For a quick way to apply your clear ultra slow drying embossing ink from Wow, you can do the direct to paper method, or in this instance direct to vellum, and directly smoosh the ink pad down onto the vellum through the stencil. And you can do this quite liberally. For the card I'm using the metallic copper embossing powder from Wow, as this really pairs well with the pink tones of the stencil background we've created. Once you've covered it in powder, you will want to heat set this with your dual speed heat gun, and depending on the weight of your vellum you may want to use the slower speed to heat set the powder to reduce the warping when you've got thinner weight vellum. It will also help prevent scorching of the paper as the tool can get quite hot. You will find though that embossing powder on vellum heats really quickly. For the rest of the card, I added a Layered Happy die cut sentiment from Altenew, and to help tie this in with the background, and I added ink to the top layer to create an ombre look. To help it even stand out further, I just backed this with an offset black die cut to create a shadow. I use my favourite way to add a secondary sentiment by creating a black strip with some white heat embossing. I'm using a Paint Bright White powder from Wow, as it really allows the sentiment to pop off the card and pop off that black strip. Just to add a finishing touch to the card, I added just a few white Nouveau drops. So I've shown you how to add heat embossed vellum as an overlay to an ink blended background, and the possibilities with this are endless. So for the second way to use a heat embossed vellum, we are going to create a shaker card. So shaker cards require a window with a barrier to keep the contents in, and usually this is acetate. But instead we're going to make this out of vellum. So I positioned several stamps from the Leaf Canopy stamp set from Altenew into the Misty, and then stamped these onto the sheet of vellum with the clear ultra slow drying embossing ink. This was covered with Metaline Himalayan Musk embossing powder from Wow, as I really wanted to keep the colour scheme of this pinky red colour throughout the series of the card, and thought this colour of this powder pairs really well. I would advise when stamping on vellum to use an anti-static bag if you've got one, as vellum can actually hold a lot of static, and although Wow does a lot to remove all the static from their powders, you may just find the odd powder stray and start sticking to the vellum. So to create the shaker window, we need to die cut a circle from your white card panel and add some fun foam sheets behind to create the dimension. To align your windows up, you can position the die back into the cutout from your card panel and place this over your fun foam sheet and draw an outline. Make sure your fun foam sheet is trimmed down to the same size as your card panel. You can then remove the card panel and realign the die over the outline to then cut it out. And so to get enough dimension with this shaker, I used 2 layers of fun foam. To trim the heat embossed vellum down, align the die cut window back over the top just to decide what part of the design you want so you can trim it down appropriately. Now, liquid glue is great for adhering your layers together, along with using some tape adhesive, but the liquid glue gives you some wiggle room so you can align your window apertures up. For the shake elements in this card, I used a sequin mix from Lucy's Cards, and this is the Sunset mix, which has some lovely pink and reds as well as gold sequins in it. When you've decided you've got enough shaker elements inside your window, you then adhere your card base down over the window, securing the contents inside. For this card, I wanted to step up the layered die cut sentiment, and to do this I just masked an area of the sentiment with some washi tape. Then I'm taking the sentiment directly to my clear ultra slow drying embossing ink pad and smushing it in to transfer the ink. Before covering with embossing powder, just remove the washi tape, and then you will get a sort of dip dye look when you heat set this. And the embossing powder I'm using is Parissa. The secondary sentiment comes from the Reason to Smile stamp set from Altenew, and I masked several sentiments within the stamp set to get this phrase, "You are stronger than you think." Again, this card was then finished off with some white Nouveau drops. So an embossed vellum window can really create a lovely, delicate, soft shaker card as an alternative to regular shaker cards. For the last way to use heat embossed vellum, we're going to create an alcohol ink background on vellum and then directly heat emboss over the top. So alcohol inks move over the surface of vellum really, really well and can create some really lovely soft finishes to the background. I used Flamingo and Wild Plum colours from Ranger to start off with, and added drops of colour over the vellum, and then used a straw to blow through to move the ink about. When you're doing this, it's really important that you make sure you work in a well ventilated room. So to soften the colours up a little bit and to allow them to blend even more and move about, I added some blending solution and then decided to come in with another colour, so I'm using coral as well. And you can get some really interesting abstract backgrounds with this technique, and you'll never get a background that's quite the same each time you make a new background. So before heat embossing on this background, it's really important that you do make sure the ink has actually dried completely, because it will obviously be sticky, and then when you stamp on it and cover it in the embossing powder, it's not only going to stick to where the embossing ink is, but also to any of the sticky alcohol ink. As I used half a sheet of A4 vellum, I could trim this background down to get 2 panels for cards. So to heat emboss, position the panel back over your MISTI, and you may want to use your anti-static bag just to ensure that there is no sticky residue left from the alcohol ink. And I am stamping in embossing ink the rose from the Altenew Inked Rose stamp set on top of the alcohol ink. And the embossing powder I'm using is Parissa embossing powder. This has a lovely mix of silver, gold and copper colours, and at different sizes of embossing powder, so when it melts they blend and mould with each other and you get a beautiful varied finish. For a more softer toned down look, you can also heat emboss on the back of the vellum alcohol ink panel, and the colours here show through but are much more muted, so you can get 2 looks with this one technique. I used a layered die cut sentiment from Little Inca Designs, this is Celebrate, and also one from Honeybee Stamps, which is beautiful, for these 2 cards. And again, I added some sentiments from the Reason to Smile stamp set, again in my preferred method of adding them as black strips with some white embossing on them. These were then adhered to the vellum panel before actually adhering the vellum panel to the card base. You want to do this because you want to be able to hide your adhesive on the vellum behind something so it's not going to show through, and sentiments are great for hiding adhesive. So in addition to this, you may also add small dabs of glue behind some of the embossed areas where it's much more thicker, so it will provide added security to the card but it won't show through the vellum. I didn't actually embellish these cards as I think they didn't need it in the end, as anything else would really distract from the bold organic background and the sentiments, as well as making the design too busy, which could detract away from the floral stamping we've done. I love all the cards I've created today, but I think these 2 alcohol ink cards are my favourite, as I love the organic nature of the backgrounds. The colours pop through the heat embossed flowers, but the cards have a lovely, soft, delicate nature to them because of the vellum element. So I hope today's video has shown you 3 ways of using heat embossed vellum in your card designs. The combination of embossing powder colours with each technique is endless and can be used for any card, no matter the occasion. So your imagination is your only limitation with this, so play and experiment. This was produced as part of my design teamwork for Embossing Powder, and links are listed down below. For 10% discount at the shop, just enter the code you see on screen. If you're not a subscriber already, why not click that button below along with the bell icon to be notified when my next video is up. Also, why not check out this other video whilst you're here. I hope you enjoyed today's technique. Until next time, happy crafting!